Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see the summary of The Woodlanders, a novel by Thomas Hardy. The themes are the complex nature of love and marriage, the conflict between tradition and modernity, and the intricate relationship between humanity and nature. And the important characters are Grace Melbury, Giles Winterbourne, George Melbury, Grace's father, Dr. Edgar Fitzpiers, Grace's husband, Phyllis Charmont, Marty South. The story begins with 20 years old Grace returning from boarding school to her hometown, Little Hintonka. And Grace's father George actually had promised Giles, who is a local farmer, that he will get Grace married to him. And so now George meets Giles and says that his daughter is returning, and he encourages Giles to pursue Grace. And Giles also begins his courtship by going to pick up Grace from a nearby town. And Grace also knows that her father wants her to marry Giles, so she is very kind to him. But at that time, what happens is a local man dies. And Giles actually was living in a lifetime lease with this man. And now, since that man has died, this house returns to wealthy Mrs. Charmont's control, and Giles had to vacate the house. Now, coming to know that Giles has no house and he is living in a hut, and that Grace is educated, beautiful, and also Mr. Melbury, that is George Melbury, Grace's father, they are a bit better off in financial position than Giles. He loses interest in getting married. His daughter getting married to Giles, so he tells Grace not to meet Giles again. And actually, the man's daughter Marty is in love with Giles, and therefore she writes on the wall that having lost his home, he will lose his Grace. But Grace sees this, and she changes the word lose to keep. And she thinks that Giles will see that and he'll be very happy. But Giles does not notice this writing on the wall. And Grace thinks maybe Giles has dropped her interest about her, and that is why he is not responding. And one day what happens is Grace's servant falls ill, and Grace takes a servant to Dr. Fitzbury, who has come to that place newly. And what happens is Dr. Fitzbury, seeing Grace, her beauty and all that, he falls for her and he wants to marry her. And every year they have in the midsummer a ritual where the girls run and they get in touch with the future partners. They have to run down a ridge where the men will be waiting. And what happens is Grace also takes part in that ritual. And when she is running across the ridge and when she is nearing the men, Dr. Fitzpiers jumps in front of Giles and he catches Grace. And Mr. Melbury also, he falls sick, and for a cough he goes to meet Dr. Fitzbury. And that time Dr. Fitzbury tells his interest about Grace, and George is very happy that Dr. Fitzbury is showing interest on Grace, and he gives him permission to court Grace. And so Mr. Fitzbury, that is a doctor, he meets Grace many times, and slowly Grace also turns her attention towards him. And when he asks he asks Grace to marry him, she agrees to marry him. They get married, and when they return from honeymoon, Dr. Fitzpiers hears that in the local aristocrat or rich woman, Mrs. Charmont has met with a minor accident. Being a doctor, he goes to visit her to give her treatment. And when he goes to visit, Mrs. Charmont says that she had recently seen him in a hotel and she recognized him because at one time they had an adolescent romance. And when she reminds him only, he also remembers that when he was a medical student in Germany, he had met her and they were very close to each other. But her mother, being a very rich family, they did not like their daughter getting involved with an ordinary medical student. So they moved to another place and they lost touch. But now, since they are in close quarters, their old romance is rekindled, and they start meeting very often. And Mrs. Charmont, she goes to the town of Middleton, which is quite a distance. And Dr. Fitzbury also, in order to join her, he tells Grace that he's seeing a patient and he goes there. But Grace discovers that this is a lie because she finds a ticket for a toll gate from Middleton in his jacket. And also her father, George Melbury, discovers the affair between Dr. Fitzbury and Mrs. Charmant, because Dr. Fitzbury, when he is half asleep, he mentions Mrs. Charmant's name, and this shocks George Melbury because his daughter's life is at stake. And after a few weeks, Dr. Fitzbury, he returns home and he finds that Grace is not at home, so he goes to Mrs. Charmant, who has returned and now is back in Hintock. And seeing him going to meet Mrs. Charmant, George Melbury follows him. But on the way itself, he finds that Dr. Fitzbury had fallen down from the horse and he was injured. And Dr. Fitzbury was not in a state to understand who was helping him, but George picked him up and he kept him in his horse and he was taking him. But what happened is, in that half wakeness, he said that he'll be free if Grace was dead. Hearing this, George Melbury gets angry and he throws him on the road and he goes away. After some time, Dr. Fitzbury crawls back to Mrs. Charmant's house, where Charmant greets him very happily like a mistress and treats him well. And from there he writes a letter to Grace telling her that he will not be seeing her again. Now both Dr. Fitzbury and Mrs. Charmant, they leave for France. And for several months, Grace is left like that, and later on she gets information that Dr. Fitzbury is returning to Little Hintock. And this makes Grace to run away from the house. And now Giles is actually living in a hut which is closer to a forest, but she walks all the distance to go and meet him. And there she says that she does not want to live with her husband again because he has cheated on her. And so she wants to go to a nearby town and she asks Giles to help her. But Giles says that it was raining so heavily, so he tells her to take shelter in his cottage for the night. And since she is a married woman and it's a very small place, he stays outside the hut. Even though it was raining, he stays there. But this affects his health and he becomes seriously ill. And in order to take care of him, Grace goes to Dr. Fitzbury, that is her husband, for help. And Dr. Fitzbury observes that Giles is dying of typhoid, and as expected, Giles passes away. Now Dr. Fitzbury tells to Grace that Mrs. Charmant was killed by her ex-lover, and therefore he has come back to live with Grace and he wants to live a peaceful life. But she refuses and she goes away. And months later, Dr. Fitzbury arranges another meeting with Grace, and slowly they meet again and again, and a connection is established. And this time, what happens is, a jealous husband of a local womensuck damsel, he tries to kill Dr. Fitzbury, and so he sets a trap. But instead of Dr. Fitzbury, Grace gets into that trap. And what happens is, her dress only gets caught in the trap, but somehow she escapes. But seeing her dress in the trap, Dr. Fitzbury thinks that Grace is dead, and he becomes very upset about her death. And on seeing that Fitzbury had got so much upset about her death, Grace decides to begin a romantic relationship with him again, and there ends the story. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box. Like the video, share it with your friends. And if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.